What's good, LATD Nation? This your boy Jay. As always, I got my partner in crime,
Rodney, aka RG from the 843, coming to you live from South Carolina as always.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We got a brand new video for y'all today. There's been a recent trailer that dropped for the new Everybody Hates Chris. Oh, Everybody Still Hates Chris show based on Everybody Hates Chris from earlier this century. Which
is funny because I really don't even think many people have even heard about this. I feel like this is something that's kind of flying under the radar for whatever the case may be. And, you know, of course, Everybody Hates Chris, you know, us being, you know, in our mid-20s now, which is crazy to say, but I mean, I won't harp on that. Growing up in the 2000s and the early 2010s, this show was really a staple for my generation in reruns on syndication.
Right.
Because you had it on Nick at Night. And when I tell you, I watched every single episode that they broadcast year after year, all the way until they stopped like showing it. Man, that show is still quoted to this day. People still love that show. People still be saying stuff like, hey, what do you say? We say, hey, little dude from across the street, let me hold $1.
Yeah, exactly. You got iconic characters like him, Greg, the mom, Rochelle.
Rochelle, for sure. Rochelle stole the show, in my opinion.
Played by Tashina Arnold, who played Pam and Martin.
Yes, sir. Terry Crews, of course, as Julius, who arguably, between them two, they might have been the stars of the show.
Oh yeah, Julius was the funniest. Like, it followed Chris, but yeah, they definitely stole the show because Tashina Arnold was great at playing a sickening mom.
Yeah,
because I remember my favorite episode of Everybody Hates Chris was the one where she tells Drew and Tanya sit, go do whatever. This dinner's over, but she tells Chris to do the dishes while Drew and Tanya just sitting there chilling, played by Monty Hakim and Taquan Richmond?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so play Drew and Tanya respectively. So she tells Chris to do the dishes by himself.
Played by Tyler James Williams, of course.
Yes, sir.
Who's gone on to have a great career.
He's in Abbott Elementary.
Yes, sir, he is.
He was in Let It Shine, the Disney Channel original movie, which is one of the few great ones.
Yeah, he's had a lot of success, low-key. He's, in my opinion, kind of been... I wouldn't say forgotten. Definitely not forgotten because he's had a lot of success since Everybody Hates Chris. But this is arguably his most iconic role, and for good reason. He really embodied, you know, that black nerd stereotype. And growing up, being a black nerd, I always related to Chris. People always wanted to compare me to Urkel and things like that. But in my opinion, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to laugh. I do too.
No, it's not that funny.
No, but yeah, no. People always compare me to Urkel. In my opinion, I always related more to Chris. You know, just the nerdy black kid, unathletic. Well, I wasn't unathletic. I just had no coordination. To this day, I still don't.
It's all good.
Y'all should see me try to play basketball. Hey, you know, LATD basketball. Who knows?
Yeah.
Hey, spam that if you want it in the comment section. But yeah,
yes, sir.
So, yeah, growing up, I related a lot to Chris just because, you know, like I said, nerdy black kid. I did have a lot of friends, so I can't really hate on that front. Or I can't really relate on that front. He just kind of, like, a lot of his mannerisms and, the goofiness and, you know, he really kind of reminded me of myself. Even down to the hairstyle, because I had the afro, he had the afro.
Right. I related to him more in a social sense in regards to I'm a big guy. Everybody thought I either played basketball or football, which I did, but they didn't. But they figured I was on the same timing as everybody else, trying to be like chasing girls all the time, all that other stuff, right?
For sure. Hey, you know, funny enough is that you say that, not to cut you off.
You good.
One of my favorite episodes of Everybody Hates Chris to this day was when they thought he could play basketball because they saw him they saw him throw a piece of paper into the trash can, so that somehow equated to him being Jordan.
Right.
And exactly. I love that episode so much because, you know, Chris Rock, who of course was incredible with his monologue and his narration. Right. He said that, yeah, I always wanted to play basketball, but the only problem is I suck. I sucked at every sport I play. I sucked at basketball. I sucked at, I think he said hockey or whatever. He said, like a fool, I even tried bowling. You just see the bowling ball hit him in the hand. One thing about that show was off the chain.
And then they called him Swish.
Yeah, they called him Swish instead of Chris.
Some girl came up to her talking about, hey Swish, can't wait for the game, and then maybe I could believe in myself too.
Yeah, because at the end of the episode, he's because throughout the whole episode, he's doubting himself, and he's wondering if he's really going to be able to give these people the show that they think they're going to get. And he's like, you know what? If all of these people believe in me, I believe in myself. And then there's a montage. He gets crossed up. He gets the ball snatched from him. He gets dunked on. And then at the end, the coach is like, I thought you could play basketball. Mind you, before he was cursed for being the only black kid in the school, but the only time his blackness was appreciated was because they thought he could dribble a basketball.
Exactly, and that was kind of the same way. I wasn't bad at basketball. Now don't get it
twisted. I wasn't anything to write home. I probably scored a total of 5-10 points the 1 year I played in high school. Right. I was more of a Rodman type. I could rebound with the best of them for sure.
No, I mean that's not even bad. It's
really not.
Being a good rebounder is what people need, especially in high school sports. So, but yeah, like I was kind of like that too. Like I was like the big man who could rebound, and I was a pretty good defender. But my thing was like I would disappoint everybody when they realized like, oh, you like anime? Yeah. You like Ben 10? You watch Ben 10? Little kids watch Ben 10. I'm like, I still watch Ben 10 is great. And keep in mind, I'm like 12.
Because the thing is, what I loved about that show is that show kind of gave representation of like being a black person in a way that a lot of times you don't see. Right. Because a lot of the time we're portrayed as the jock or the athlete or whatever the case may be. And that episode is an example of how they would flip that kind of thing on its head. Right. Because Chris was really like young Chris Rock, being portrayed by Tyler James Williams. It was different because he wasn't the suave, charismatic. He was no Will Smith. Like he was no Fresh Prince of Bel-Air type of individual. He wasn't even an over-the-top, exaggerated nerd like Carlton, which I do think Carlton still was portrayed very well in the show.
I agree.
But they kind of portrayed him as kind of just being just a kid trying to go through life. And they did a really good job as far as embodying his experience growing up in Bed-Stuy and what his experience was as being a black teenager back then and going to this all-white school and things like that. So they did a really good job of finding a lot of humor in situations that Chris Rock himself has said that were low-key traumatic, whatever the case may be. Because there's an interview that Chris Rock did where he detailed that the bullying that he experienced in these schools were actually way worse than what would obviously be portrayed
I can imagine.
On TV. And what I love is that Chris Rock found the humor in that, and he used that as a way to kind of benefit himself. So he kind of turned his pain into, his triumph. And I think ultimately that's what that show did a good job of representing. It taught you how to laugh at yourself and to just kind of go through life and kind of keep a head on your shoulders, stand tall, whatever the case may be. That show was a classic.
It definitely is.
It's one of my favorite shows of all time. That show was pitch perfect in terms of its casting, in terms of the era, and really, even if you watch it now, it's still fire to this day. The James Brown episode is one of my favorites, where he scratched because he's trying to become a DJ, and he's practicing like scratching records. He accidentally scratches the Payback record, Rochelle's favorite record. So he has to try to replace it, but he doesn't have the money to do so.
Like another one of my favorite episodes was when him and Drew when Drew tries to go see Wayne Gretzky. Yeah, and he's like in the beginning montage is just Chris getting in trouble because of what Drew does, and I'm like, I don't blame Chris for wanting to leave him, but I like that episode because it just shows him how him and his brother just kind of, how they kind of didn't understand each other at first, but now they got closer and everything by the end of the episode.
Yeah, because at the end of the episode, he said that for the first time, he didn't see Drew as somebody he had to look after. He looked at him like a friend. Right. And that's the thing I loved about that show is that it had a lot of humor and it had a lot of funny moments, but it had a heart and a soul to it. Because that show is hilarious to this day. It just had a heart and a soul that I feel like we don't necessarily see in a lot of mainstream TV nowadays.
Right.
So in one sense,
funny enough, not to cut you.
No, you're good. You're good.
Mr. Thurman, you remember Mr. Thurman? He was actually in the. I'm gonna bring it up again. He was actually in The Wire.
Mr. Thurman?
Yeah, Mr. Thurman. He played Vondas, the Greek's right hand man in The Wire. You would know that if you watched the show.
Who was Mr. Thurman?
Mr. Thurman was in like the later season when he went to Tatalia High or something like that.
I think I know what you're talking about.
He was like the football coach or something like that.
Oh, okay, I got you. I thought you were saying Mr. Omar, which I mean, I know who Mr. Omar is.
Mr. Thurman is a white guy.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say. But yeah, no, another thing about that show is that really made it great is how like it kind of tackled the racism that he dealt with in a funny way, because you had his teacher, Miss Morella, who always like pitied him and acted like he was ignorant or something. He was down terrible because he was black and he from a bad neighborhood. This, that, and the third. Chris Rock really wrote that show in a way to where he just knew how to have a positive sense of himself and the things that he went through. Like he could have portrayed it as being this terrible. Which is what a lot of time Hollywood tries to do. They try to portray us as downtrodden and, we're just so impoverished. And no, this show did a really good job of like celebrating his life and the things that he went through and looking at things in a positive way. So
not everything was doom and gloom.
Yeah. And go ahead.
You good. Go ahead.
So, and with that being said, with this show, everybody still hates Chris. I don't know how I feel about this. Just based on the trailer that came out today, I want to give it a chance just off of the fact that this is one of my favorite shows ever coming back. But like how we've seen with a lot of recent stuff, not everything needs to be remade or rebooted or revived. I think we're just in an era where creativity just is at an all-time low. And you're just starting to see people just come up with, what can we reboot next? Oh, I know everybody loves Everybody Hates Chris. Let's bring that back. Right. Everybody loved Good Times 40 years ago. Let's bring that back.
And that's the biggest stutter. But that's the biggest one that came to mind when I saw that trailer.
That's what a lot of people are comparing it to.
Because it's like Good Times 40 years ago, back in in the 1970s, was a classic show about a family in poverty who was trying to get out the ghetto. Now they have multiple chances to get out, but Florida's wanted to keep her morals, I guess, got in the way of them getting out of the ghetto and everything in Chicago. Whatever the case. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But when they remade it, and then they had Seth MacFarlane be a part of it.
That's how you knew. I don't know what they was. I love Seth MacFarlane. Those two shows, Family Guy and American Dad, and really Cleveland Show, will all have a lot of special memories attached to it for me. But why would you bring him to write a show like this?
Not even just that, a black show. Not even that. Why would you have?
Hey, he has black friends, so he gets it.
Okay, so but yeah, that's my biggest worry with this show because everybody.
Don't he wrote black characters? Cleveland Show. Granted, it only lasted for 3 years, but hey, it existed, right? He got his credentials, Jay. Let him live, let him cook. But I digress. You go ahead.
Anyway, as I was saying, but that's my biggest worry with this show as well because it's just like. Well, like you said, not everything needs a remake.
It's just gotten to the point where it just seems like they're just desperate to bring anything back. Like, why?
Because the thing is, it's not even that Good Times being a remake was the bad part. It's the fact that
it's how it was remade.
How it was remade, double toasted. We always talk about them. They had a whole reaction to it, and they hated it naturally because even from the trailer, because the jokes are very stereotypical and everything, and I'm afraid that it's going to be the same way cranked up to 11 years.
So you think that they're gonna kind of take all the nuance out of the original show?
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah,
because you already know animation already brings its own type of style anyway. Like people want to over exaggerate a lot of things anyway. Like look at, I don't really have a good example. But
one thing I will say and kind of give this the benefit of the doubt as far as it being animated is that the original show was kind of wacky when it came to certain like cutaways and things like that.
Okay.
Like you remember that episode? Well, the episode we were just talking about, the James Brown one, where you had Tyler James Williams like dancing and kind of sort of portraying James Brown and everything, right. And he was dressed like him and everything like that. So the show definitely had some wacky elements to it, where they would kind of have these fantastical sort of scenarios and cutaway gags and things like that. So that I could definitely see being translated well into animation to give it a fair shake, to give it the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I can see that.
I do agree that I am worried that the nuance is going to be taken out of this show just because I feel like we're in an era now where things aren't what they used to be.
Right.
So now, how is the original show's humor going to translate to this modern era? Because now it's like there's certain things you can't say, certain things you can't talk about, certain things that you can't really portray unless it's in a certain way. So, it could work, but it's a matter of how it's going to be brought back. Chris Rock is once again back.
Okay.
And he is overseeing and directing the show. So that's good news.
Right.
So there is a possibility that it could still be great and it could still be in tow with the original vision. But I just don't know if this is going to work the same way that it did in the 2000s, because you got to think the original show started in 2005. We're nearly 20 years removed from that point, which is crazy to think about. So how do you think that that's going to work as far as this new modern era? We haven't seen a lot about how the jokes and the humor is going to work in this show. We've only seen the bare minimum, like, oh, it's animated. We've heard a few voices, but we haven't really seen much of just how the show is going to be different from the original.
Right. And to follow you up, I agree with what you're saying. I see what you mean about the animation, and if they do it right, the animation can definitely benefit from the wackiness of the original show.
Yeah, because the original show definitely was wacky in certain parts.
But,
for sure.
But the humor was clever, though. That's the only thing.
That is true. You remember that one episode where where Chris Rock said, or who I can't remember who it was. Somebody said, imagine if there was a gun in this house and then everybody was pulling guns on each other for just like trivial stuff. Right, who ate that last piece of chicken? Was it you?
Yeah.
Baby girl? Pointing it at Tony. So there's stuff like that where you see that it's wacky and it's over the top, but it was still done in a way to where it was kind of it was tasteful.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of what this show needs to be. As wacky as it's more than likely going to be, it needs to be tasteful. And another big thing about Everybody Hates Chris, the original show, it's just the fact that it wasn't nothing even felt offensive.
Yeah,
nothing was like offensive. Everything felt like par for the course. It didn't it talked about like racial issues, but at the same time, it was just Chris and everybody else was just what you consider just a normal family.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like it touched on racial elements, touched on really heavy topics, but a lot of the stuff about it, a lot of the messages that in the shows were really grounded and relatable. Especially when I mentioned the episode when he didn't do the dishes and everything, and then him and his mom have a falling out over it.
Yeah,
and in my honest opinion, Chris was right to a degree, but even at the end of the episode, he still had to clean up the dishes. And I like how Julius talked to him and gave him the lowdown about how, there's sometimes you're going to be right, but regardless, your mom has the last say, and different things like that. Same thing when, what's his name? Orlando Bloom? What am I saying?
Orlando Brown?
Not Orlando Brown. It's he played, I forgot his name, but he played Dr. Lee in Drumline, or if you've seen American Gods, he played Mr. Nancy. I forgot his name, but either way, he plays a version of Bill Cosby.
I remember that episode.
In the touching scene where he goes to help Greg because Greg is just depressed for some odd reason. But scenes like that and moments like those, and it just had a really touching moments to him as much as the comedy was led up to the forefront.
It had a lot, like I said, it had humor, but it had a lot of heart.
Right.
It had a lot of heart to it.
So, and I hope this show doesn't lose that. I want
That's
it to
what
be.
I'm saying.
I want it to be tonal. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying. I just hope that it stays. I hope that it's able to still balance, because like we said with the animation, it has thread of being a little wacky and over the top. I hope that they still manage to balance things out and keep things kind of, I guess, grounded.
Right. Don't make it not like a Looney Tunes grounded, but more like maybe like.
I don't want to see characters hitting each other over the head with gavels every episode and stuff like that.
That part, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like more like a Fillmore type of grounded.
And I don't want it to be a bunch of crass humor, just lowbrow, just race jokes with no substance or anything like that.
And like I said, that's the biggest part that I'm worried about. That's the biggest thing that I'm worried about, like in this show. It's like I mentioned with the Good Time show. I hope it doesn't turn into that, because it very much well could, because it has the criteria 1980s Bed-Stuy, the original show being about race anyway, and about like certain the culture back then and everything. It very much has the criteria to be, if not worse than Good Times that came out earlier this year.
Yeah,
it has that same type of. I'm gonna repeat myself.
It seems like it's on that same type of timing.
Exactly, it has the potential to be, but I hope it is not. I hope it has, like we said, I hope it has that same amount of heart that the original show had.
For sure, I completely agree. I guess Jury is really out until it premieres. This month?
Yep,
so on the 25th.
On the 25th.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead. We'll definitely let everybody know what we think. We're going to watch that first episode, and we're going to give y'all our thoughts and opinions on it. I'm rooting for it to succeed, just because I don't want the original's legacy to be tarnished. Even if this isn't as good as the original, I just don't want the original's name stained. I just don't want that. I grew up with that show.
I 100% agree. I was
watching that show from I was probably 9, 10 years old.
Right.
Because that show came on in syndication in like 09. Because it ended in 09, and then it was on Nick in syndication later that year.
Right.
And it stayed on syndication from that point until at least middle school. Because I remember watching that show in early middle school, like around probably 11, 12 years old. Ben Moore, shout out Ben if he watches, which he probably ain't. He might watch this episode since it's about Everybody Hates Chris. That's one of his favorite shows.
Oh, word.
He quotes that show to this day. Every time we talk, he quotes that show. He knows that show. That in Boondocks, love those shows to death.
Even back in high school, me and him would be cracking up about about Everybody Hates Chris all the time.
For sure, he's a big fan of the original. So if anything, I want to know what his thoughts and opinions is going to be on this. We talked about it a little bit, but I can't wait to see what he has to say about the finished product. So that's definitely going to be an interesting thing to see. But overall, I'm cautiously optimistic. As cautiously optimistic as I can possibly be.
I'm the same way.
We will see what happens. I'm not counting it out. Chris Rock is my favorite comedian of all time. So Chris Rock, I definitely want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Same.
We'll see what... Because my thing is, I don't think Chris Rock would just do something just for a cash grab anyway. Because he's rich enough and been around long enough to where he doesn't have to do that if he doesn't want to.
Exactly. He's easily one of my favorite comedians of all time as well. He's in my top 5. I want to say he's in my top 5.
Yeah, so I don't think that he would be at a point where he feels like he needs to cash grab anything. So hopefully he done this off the strength of his belief in it and its necessity for it. The only thing I wonder is the original show did end when he dropped out and when Julius was about to die that night, that episode, the last episode, it kind of implies what eventually did happen in real life. His father passing away. And of course he dropped out to become a comedian eventually. So I wonder if the original show is going to expand on certain things that may have been explored. And I wonder if this show, the sequel show, is going to expand on ideas and storylines that maybe didn't get as much follow through in the original. I don't want it to just retread the same exact plot lines.
I agree. I was going to say that too.
I want to see if they're going to do something set. It can be set within the same timeline, but different topics and different stories and different ideas.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I'm not as optimistic about it as you. I'm not pessimistic. I'm just kind of like in the middle.
In the middle, yeah. For sure.
But I'll see. We'll see. We'll talk about it. Like, if it's like a whole binge episode, that they dropped the whole thing, we can probably binge watch and do like a review on that.
For sure, we could definitely look into doing that for sure. Because I'm really eager to see what they do with this show.
Yeah, I do want to see where it goes. I'm not, like I said, I'm not over the moon about it, but I want to see. I want to give it a try because I love the original show too. Not as much as you, but
I love that original show now.
But still, yeah. With that being said, man, I've been Jay.
This has been Rodney.
And we're LATD. Y'all look at the details now. Peace.